Thank you. Tonight we're going to start our business meeting on June 15th at 7:38 p.m. Roll call, please, Brenda.
Recording in progress.
All right, Member Orr.
Here.
Member Hassanadka.
Yes, here.
Member Demmett.
Here.
Member Hall.
Here.
Member Carter's here. Vice President Exum.
Here.
And President Pulaski.
Here, I would also like to note that Member Dimmitt is attending from home after recently suffering a heart attack. There may be periods tonight where he turns his camera off or reclines on his couch, but we want to thank him for attending tonight and being here for a very important business meeting. Moving on, are there any additions, corrections, or modifications to tonight's agenda? Okay, so now we'll go to citizen statements, and we have one here in person. Johannes Frazier is here to give us a citizen statement.
Got it. Thanks. Thanks for having me. I've also submitted it, as you know, as a piece of paper, so you can discard that piece of paper. But my name is Johannes Frazier, and my wife and I have two children, 7 and 9 years old, who currently attend Yale. And over the past year, we've been very appreciative of the hard work and efforts of staff and teachers who provide distance learning options. And that's been working out well for us. It's been difficult as it has been for many parents and staff, but we're very appreciative of that. And I want to make that very clear. For the upcoming school year, though, we feel strongly that because there's not a COVID-19 vaccine available for youth under the age of 12, that USD should offer a virtual learning option for children in this age group. And we would appreciate USD continuing with the virtual learning options that are going on now were in the past year, until there is an opportunity for children under 12 to be vaccinated. We recognize that virtual learning is not ideal for everyone, but either is returning to on-site learning without a vaccine opportunity. Our family would not feel safe returning to on-site learning until all children under 12 have the option to be vaccinated like the adults have. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. There is no call for an executive session after tonight's meeting. So I'd like to have it's time to approve the agenda for tonight. There's no amendments.
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Orr.
Yes.
Member Hassanadka.
Yes.
Member Demmett.
Yes.
Member Hall.
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Exum.
Yes.
And President Pulaski.
Yes, there are no accommodations, no public hearings or communications tonight. So our first administrative report are our school improvement updates. Ms. Norton.
Good evening, everyone. 2 weeks ago, you heard from our early childhood and elementary administrators regarding their school improvement plans and the goals that they had and the assessment measures that they were putting in place that would align with our district goals. They were very thoughtful in their planning. We want to commend the work that the school improvement teams have done. And tonight you will be hearing from Gerber, from Mrs. Roan, and you'll hear from Dr. Wiemeltz, principal at UMS, and Julie Blixen, assistant principal at Urbana High School. And also Mr. Nance was involved in the school improvement planning days. And I just want to note for everyone again that these are working documents for our continuous school improvement plans. So all of the work will continue. We will revise these plans and update. And in all of the plans, there is a portion that all of the data can be included. So we'll be adding updates to these plans every month. So we will also post these plans, actual plans, on our website, and then you can reference the secondary plans as we're going through the presentation this evening. So just to review our district goals, we have 5 main goals. For our SEL goal, it's transforming learning spaces to be safe and supportive for all students. Our math goal, to identify and align mathematical standards and skills across all grade levels. And we do have a district math committee that's in place. And then we'll be looking at resources that they will be piloting soon. And our literacy goal is to identify literacy standards and skills across all grade levels. And with our math and with our literacy, we will also use our ESSER funds. And just to remind everyone that we have to have at least 20% that goes for learning renewal. And then goal 4 is our first equity goal, is to provide equitable access to culturally responsive curriculum, as well as utilizing equitable assessment practices in order to ensure social and academic advancement through educational opportunities. And we mentioned previously that we're really excited that we will have district-wide assessments for SEL, and that'll be Panorama that we'll be benchmarking. And then we'll also be using NWEA MAP for literacy and math for our academic benchmarking. And then we do have, we're really excited that over the summer we will have our elementary schools and middle school and high school that will have teachers that will be piloting that. And for goal 5, our second equity goal is utilizing culturally responsive teaching practices in order to promote student success and individual well-being. And to start us off this evening, we have Mrs. Roan that will be presenting for Gerber.
How are you? I'm Jennifer Roan. I'm the principal at Gerber School, and I just want to share with you a little bit about our school improvement plan this year. Our school improvement plan this year looks very similar to last year's plan. Because of the constraints of COVID, we did not feel like we were able to make as much progress with our goals as we always like to do. So we reviewed and revised with all of our teachers and came up with some goals that we feel like are very important for our group of young people. So as far as social emotional learning, we are really going to work hard to build in the skills for our young people to help them really transition into those real world settings. As many of you on the board know, the students at Gerber come from some very traumatic backgrounds. And so helping them gain those real world skills to be successful has been a high priority at Gerber for a very long time. And so we're going to continue to work on that. And we're going to integrate the zones of regulation more thoroughly into our social skills curriculum to help them work on the emotional regulation piece and continue to try to keep them in class. We also have an equity goal focused on raising awareness in our young people. I think we have a very interesting setting where on one hand, the youth that are at Gerber have experienced more in their lifetimes than any of us would ever want youth to experience, but they also have very little exposure to the positive aspects of culture and community. So that has been definitely a goal for our staff, is to help encourage our young people to learn more about themselves and learn more about the community around them in a positive way, including race, ethnicity, gender, LGBTQ, disability advocacy, all of those things that can really help kids be successful in today's communities. The other piece that academically we're going to work on two different pieces. Writing is a big piece for our kids. We have a lot of students that really have an aversion to writing. And so we've been working very hard with our young people in trying to increase their perseverance in writing and the clarity with which they are able to share their thoughts. So that's going to be something that we're going to continue in the coming year. And then also math skills. Our youth have frequently been through many different school placements before coming to Gerber School. And we find that math is an academic area that has historically very impacted for kids that have moved around a lot. They've created these gaps in their math skills. So we are going to work very hard to try to fill in those gaps so that all of our students leave Gerber with a very solid understanding of basic and applied math. And we have been using the iReady program that UMS has adopted several years back. And we have found that that really has provided a solid foundation for our young people, and it has a great diagnostics tool. So we're going to continue to utilize that and to train our new staff and our paraprofessionals to have a better understanding of the diagnostic tool and implementation of that. We are very excited to have our kids return to even more in-person time. We were very blessed this year to have more time with our students in person than most of the other schools in the district. But we know that our kids really need that in-person attention. And so we're excited to tackle these goals with our students. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Board, are there any questions for Principal Rome? Well, I just want to start off by saying for those board members who haven't had the opportunity to visit Gerber, not only is it in a wonderful new building, but the dedication and passion of their staff is truly inspiring. I wholeheartedly recommend everybody take a plan to visit Gerber. I don't have any specific questions for you, though.
Thank you. And yes, we would love to have anybody come visit. Just give me a call, let me know. I would love to show off our space and our program.
Thank you.
I'd like to second that, what Paul said. Jennifer, I love touring the facility pre-COVID to see all the great new updates that you had and to see the kids and the staff. And I would be happy to accompany either of the two new board members to take a tour just so they could see what we do and also to refresh my memory because, like I said, it's been pre-COVID since I was there, but it's such vital work that you do and you're tucked away and, you know, it's you deserve a lot more attention and credit than we sometimes give you in our meetings. So I'd love to take you up on that invitation sometime in the next year.
Perfect. Thank you. We feel like we're a hidden gem, and now that we're able to allow visitors in the building again, we'd love to have you come through.
Hey, Jennifer, did you have any graduates this year? I was thinking about them and kind of missing the whole in-person option, but I wasn't quite sure if there were any Gerber grads this year or not.
We did. We had 4 seniors graduate, and we were able to do kind of a blended ceremony for them with a few of our other students and important folks in person, and then the rest of our students were able to watch the ceremony via Zoom. It wasn't as nice as when we're able to do our full in-person ceremonies, but it was wonderful that we were able to offer them a little bit. And This class actually held a very special place in my heart because a couple of the young people we have had since elementary school, which is very rare for us, but it was just wonderful to see the progress those young people have made.
Very nice. Please make sure we do get an invite for next year. I'd love to hopefully attend in person again.
Absolutely. We would love to have you.
Any further questions? All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Roan. Next, we will have Dr. Wiemel with Urbana Middle School.
Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Wiemel, principal at Urbana Middle School, and excited to be with you this evening to share a little bit about our work for school improvement at Urbana Middle School. And like the other schools, we have 4 broad categories of our SMART goals, but I would encourage you and emphasize the link that's linked down at the bottom that's called UMS Mission, Vision, Values, and Goals. Is our actually 2-page document that we reference in everything that we do at UMS and all of our meetings. It's on our UMS website, it's linked in my email address, all kinds of different spaces where our broader mission, vision, and our core values really drive everything else that we do. And so the goals that I'm going to talk about this evening are just subcomponents of our broader mission and vision as a school. And I would encourage the board to take a look at the more in-depth information on that 2-page document that's linked there. Of course, you have the full school improvement plan as well, which is much more detailed, but these 4 goals are just a little bit, and I'm going to talk through each goal a little bit more in depth, but it's just a piece of what we're looking at. But these goals should really be focused on very specific and targeted areas of growth. And so that's what we'll talk about tonight, just like the other schools. And so our first goal area is in the area of math. And so you'll see it's all worded very similarly because we want to have very clear targets, measures in place from when to when, so on and so forth. And so across math, literacy, and SEL, we'll be looking at growth targets of our students. And so we want to take a look in the fall at their baseline assessment scores in math, literacy, and social emotional learning, and then set the growth target for each student as it relates to what we know from norms and the MAP assessments and the Panorama assessments, and then really measure the amount of growth that students make from fall to spring with us. And so we're looking at a minimum of 90% of our students making a minimum of 10% growth on each of those assessment areas, from fall to spring. And so while 90% growing 10% or more, that would be really emphasizing looking at their individual pathways and targets that are set based on how they do in the fall. And so we'll know much more specific numbers once we do our pre-assessment in the fall in regards to exactly how much growth is anticipated for each student. But that's just a little bit about the metrics and the data. But for math and literacy, we're really emphasizing just broadly improving our curriculum alignment, our instruction, and our assessment practices for all teachers of mathematics. So that's pretty much almost everyone in the building teaches math in some way, some more formally than others. So it's really emphasizing aligning and strengthening our curriculum and common assessment practices. This will be year 2 of our assessment data protocol, which is a internal system that we put in place to analyze student assessment and student work monthly in teams. And then each team reviews their student assessment data and reflects on the strengths, areas for concern, and then sets goals for students. And we break that data down in demographics and groups. So then we set targets around equity gaps that we might have. And those assessment data protocol processes are embedded in the teaching and learning of every single teacher's classroom. So it's live in the moment. This is my data, and here's my goal for next month when I do this again. And so that's our assessment data protocol that you'll see across all subject areas at Urbana Middle School. We're also moving to more standards-based and equitable grading practices and more rigorous and culturally responsive teaching practices, particularly with a focus on AVID and AVID school-wide with focusing on teaching and learning strategies called WICR, which is an acronym we presented back in maybe the winter or early spring on AVID. So AVID is a really critical component of our school improvement plan and our school improvement goals across all 4 areas, but definitely in math as well. We're also really trying to emphasize student voice and student goal setting within all of our goals, all of our school improvement goals. So we really want to take student data fall, winter, spring, and have students reflect on where they're scoring and across the different areas of the assessments that we're giving, and have them set goals and targets for their own growth, and then reflect with their teachers on how much growth they've made, what goals they need to set at the winter, or at the winter benchmark and moving into the spring. And so we're really trying to create more student ownership over their learning and student agency in their learning. And so that's a piece that has come out of some of our most recent surveys that we've been a part of with 5 Essentials and other areas, is that we want to try to create more self-advocacy and responsibility for students to take an active role in their learning as well. So that's a big component of all of our goals. When I jump down to literacy, again, it's that at least 90% of UMS students will meet their growth targets on MAP literacy assessments. The same areas, really trying to strengthen and align our curriculum and in our assessment practices, really looking at student work, common student work, right? So all 6th grade language arts teachers are looking at their 6th grade students and the common assessment that they've all given. They're analyzing that data and setting goals to close inequities and also to move all students forward from one month to the next. And so that really builds into what we would consider like professional learning communities, where we're looking at data, having conversations around data and setting goals regularly, not just once a year. Also really want to emphasize the AVID and Wicker strategies also for literacy, and every single teacher at UMS is a literacy teacher in some way. And so this literacy professional development and instructional coaching that we're going to be working on holistically is going to be really important for every single teacher, because it's not just our English language arts teachers that teach literacy, right? It's every single teacher. We have to be literate and develop literate students in all subject areas and all facets of education. So that's a really important goal. Goal number 3 is related to SEL, social emotional learning, and really emphasizes around that growth of 90% of students growing at least 10% from fall to spring. And that's on the Panorama assessment that will be new to us as well this year. But also as a subset of our SEL goal, is also really, well, let me back up for a second. I meant to mention that at the heart of this SEL goal is building social emotional intelligence of our students and their capacities to be more reflective and take more responsibility over their social and emotional learning, right? So it's an awareness piece around self-awareness, social awareness, responsible decision-making, those core CASEL competencies as it relates to social emotional learning. A subset within that is also a measure that we look at that's very important to us is chronic absenteeism and reducing the number and percent of students who are chronically absent, which we've seen great trends the last 3 years. We've cut our chronic absenteeism in half over the past 2 years, which we're really excited about, but it's a continued focus of ours. So you'll see that in our goal and our action steps as it relates to what types of work that we're really emphasizing here. It's our multi-tiered system of supports, really building off the strengths of our student services department, right? So our social workers, our counselors, our clinical professionals, student engagement advocates, really implementing and refining and improving our tiered system of supports for students who need additional social and emotional support or other mental health supports. The attendance team and different interventions from our SEAs, as well as a continuous reconnection to restorative practices, and really focusing on replacement behaviors and skill building for students, not just punishment, not just discipline that is just a form of punishment with no teaching and learning involved. We really want to create space for students to reflect and learn from any misbehaviors or mistakes, because it's really a reflection of not having the skills to manage or to cope or to be aware of of how to react in those moments when it relates to behavior. Of course, students goal setting there as well, and family engagement. And jumping down, because I'm talking quite a bit, and I know you have a long night, so our 4th goal in regards to equity. And so the way in which we frame our equity goal, it's also a broader goal here, but then much more explicit within the action steps. But we want to be intentional with closing gaps and outcomes across student groups. So we believe that culturally responsive teaching and culturally relevant curriculum are action steps, but our outcomes, that what we want to see change also is the gaps between student groups closing. And so that's why we emphasize a minimum of 5% gap decrease between different student groups. And we really want to do that by fostering a more equity conscious and restorative school community, where those student outcomes are no longer disparate, or we're on a pathway to closing those disparate outcomes. And some of the action steps that we're taking to do that are continuing our anti-racism committee, which was formed around March of this past school year, LGBTQ plus task force, and a lot of other initiatives that we're really emphasizing around professional development, staff self-reflection, continuous self-reflection as it relates to issues of equity, more culturally responsive teaching practices, as well as a continuation of the recruitment and retention of our diverse staff and our staff of color across a variety of different positions. We're very proud of our work that we've done as a school community as it relates to our staff more closely representing our student body. And so that's a continuous action step for us as it relates to our equity goal, as well as student goal setting and family engagement from an equity lens as well. So you'll see some of those same action steps across all 4 of our goal areas, because all of those action steps will impact math, literacy, equity, and social emotional learning. And so that's a real quick overview of a lot of work. Our school improvement plan is like 15 pages. And so this is just a snapshot of the work that we're doing, but we're very proud of our team that has been working over the past several years on our school improvement initiatives. Our whole faculty and staff has really wrapped around our common mission and vision, and really feel positive about the momentum that we have and the pathway that we're taking together. So that's my presentation this evening. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. Board, are there any questions?
I don't necessarily have any questions, but thank you, Dr. Remelt. I guess I just wanted to also reflect and possibly add some food for thought. There's been a lot of conversation about student advocacy on the board and thinking about student voice. And I know that part of what you were talking about is encouraging students to not only reflect on themselves, but reflect on their environment in ways in which they can become critical thinkers and offer critical feedback. And so I guess I'm wanting to kind of reinsert that idea in conversation that our students are learning these skills and also should be able to reflect in some of these positions of leadership that we have here on the board. So I know there's a lot of work going on, but kind of thinking about how that relates to some of these long range planning goals and how we can facilitate as a board that happening.
I wonder if there would be, that's a great point in area of food for thought, as you said. And I think there might be some really innovative ways that we could incorporate student voice with some kind of direct linkage to the board in regards to different long-term goals or other areas that you had mentioned. A couple of years ago, we had talked about possibly, there was a middle school student who's now a high school student who wanted a seat at the board table. And so we talked a lot about what that would look like. And I believe the board in the past few months, I know COVID has derailed a lot of things, but was looking at a high school student representative. And so maybe there's a way for a middle school student or a student leadership group to have voice at that level as well. So I'll definitely continue thinking about that and maybe follow up soon.
Thank you.
Great. Any further questions?
I can't tell you how excited I am to have Avid finally in Urbana. I know it's been a long time coming. Jennifer Tatum tried to get this here some years back as assistant superintendent, and I am so happy it's here. I think it's going to be so great for our children. I'm also really happy to see the focus on attendance. I know that has been a struggle in the past, and obviously if kids are not in school, they're not typically learning. So that's definitely a plus to make sure that the attendance goal is in. And then I know, Joe, you and I have had some conversations individually on the goal to get our teacher and staff population to look like our students. And I just want to say good job on working with getting those numbers up. I know that there were some increases in that area, and I think that's important and again critical to our students, especially the students of color. So good job on that. Keep up the good work. And I really like the plan. I did have just one question, and you may have mentioned it. I kind of had a couple points where it was cutting in and out for me, but are you still using or planning to use Behavior Flip?
Yes. Behavior Flip is definitely going to continue. We'll be starting year 3. Oop. Can you hear me okay? This will be. Hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm hearing some
Yes, we can.
background noise. Okay, so yes, we'll be in year 3 of Behavior Flip this coming school year. And this past year, of course, with a lot of the year being remote, we didn't fully utilize it as we have in the past, but we're definitely excited to continue utilizing Behavior Flip next year. And inside the full school improvement plan, you'll see Behavior Flip listed out in some of the action steps and the way in which we're going to continue using it. But yes, to answer your question. And thank you for the other comments. Those are all areas that we are.
Thank you.
Thank you for the other comments. Those are all areas that we're really excited for AVID, and we're really emphasizing attendance. As you said, the first year when I was principal in 2018-19, our chronic absenteeism rate was 37%, which means 37% of our students missed more than 10% of the school year. And the past 2 years, we've dropped that now in half. This past year was right at 16%. And so our goal next year is to be under 15%, which would be under the state average. And so that's an important goal of ours. And teacher recruitment and retention is near and dear to my heart. And I think is probably one of the most, if not the most important strategies that we can implement is the teachers who are working with our students and reflecting our student body. So thank you for that.
One quick comment and one quick question. I really am excited about how you're measuring student growth and tracking that monthly and breaking it down demographically. I think it's probably an excellent opportunity for you to present this innovation at future conferences and write a paper on it. But outside of that, I was wondering what if you could describe what the Panorama Survey is and how you guys selected that.
Sure. So it's a survey that's given in like benchmark increment periods, and it's really focused on those standards around social emotional learning standards and those I'm blanking on the CASEL competencies. I don't think competency is the right word, but those 5 skills and standards that are emphasized in social emotional learning. But it's surveys that students, families, and staff would all take 3 times a year. And then you would be able to review that data, of course, after those surveys are given to set goals that relates to certain areas where scores are lower across those 5 standards of social emotional learning. And why Panorama was chosen, I can't speak to, maybe Ms. Norton could, but it's definitely one of the few benchmarking tools that's used for social emotional learning that is out there. And I do know that there's a lot of really positive praise around it. And we're really excited to have some data as it relates to that, because it's been such an important goal of ours, and without much direct or explicit data directly tied to those standards the way that this would do. But Mrs. Norton, maybe you could explain it much better than I could.
No, you explained it really well. Just a couple other points is it really focuses that students can identify their emotions and how they're feeling, specifically zones of regulation that we are implementing in all of our buildings. That's going to really help is that self-awareness that Dr. Wiemelt spoke of, and that's one of the CASEL competencies. But then another critical point is that, and there's even one question that's very specific that all students will take, is that they have someone that they feel that they can trust within a school or home and a go-to person. And that's so important at all levels. And so we just want to make sure at all levels, students feel safe and supported. And that information from those benchmark assessments that we'll take will help, as all of our assessments will inform learning, whether it's academic or social emotional learning. So we can provide more support to our teachers if needed, or a multi-tiered system of supports other layers of interventions for students. So that social emotional piece is just as important as the academic piece, if not more.
Great, thank you. Any further questions?
I just wanted to build on Laura's point about student leadership. And indeed, COVID, we lost a lot of momentum at the high school, but I believe there's a continuing commitment. And the consultant we brought in wanted to start at the high school, but then eventually include the middle school. And hopefully we can get Derek Peterson, that's the consultant, back into the community before we lose momentum out of the high school as well. We've lost a lot of students that have graduated out that were really pushing hard for student voice at the board table. And I think that's the more we allow the students to have a voice in what they're about themselves, the more productive and the more involved and the more ownership the student has in their education. And I think you've done a magnificent job of it at the middle school. And hopefully we'll see more of it as kids matriculate through the system.
Yeah. With all of those points, definitely.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Joe.
No problem.
Thank you, Dr. Wiemelt.
Okay, thank you all.
Am I up?
You are up. I am just trying to slide to the next. Here we
Okay.
go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Blixen. I'm the assistant principal for student engagement here at Urbana High School. And I know that you all know that this has been a really interesting year for all of us here at the high school. But one thing that we did do this year was centered around our school improvement plan. The district has a very big push for social emotional learning. And 2 years ago now, when Dr. Berenson came, we set forth a 3-year social emotional learning plan. And while we did have to adjust that plan a bit due to COVID, we have stayed on track with that social emotional learning plan. So I'm going to quickly go through our goals, and in our actual plan is where we have some of those percentages that were listed in the middle school plan. So what our literacy goal is to identify, align, and align horizontally and vertically literacy standards across all courses. And to do that, we've talked about identifying literacy specific vocabulary at all grade levels, and working to use common language for reading and writing assessments, and also utilizing professional development to enhance our literacy instruction. We'll be using MAPS data to track our students' progress in the area of reading and literacy, and looking at those benchmarks throughout the year to see what kind of growth that they are making. Our math goal is, going back up to it. Okay, our math goal is to also identify and align across the mathematical standards and skill across all the courses. And with both math and literacy, we're wanting to kind of bridge the gap between what they're learning in middle school and then what they're coming to high school with. So looking at across grade levels, like which classes are teaching which things, and really having a more cohesive plan about what strategies and activities and content the students are learning. We will be using our MAP data from fall to spring to have 90% of our students show that growth on that MAP data. Some of these things are listed in our goals and targets underneath the actual goal. So when you go to the actual plan, it lays out those targets with the percentages and things. So back to our social emotional learning goal, as I said earlier, our social emotional goal, we're entering year 3 of our 3-year plan. And one thing we're being very cognizant of as we're going through this is not only the social emotional learning of our students, but also the social emotional capacity of our teachers and staff. We spent the first year and a half learning all about CASEL's 5 competencies of social emotional learning, and how that relates to our students, how that relates to our teaching, and how that can be integrated into all content areas and into all areas of the building. So, a lot of times people think I teach math. That's what I teach. I'm not going to veer off and talk about the warm fuzzies. But through learning about the competencies and ways to embed them in the teaching, our teachers were able to branch out of some of their comfort zones a little bit and be able to bring those competencies into their lessons.
And that has really helped with both our staff and our students. So at this point, we are ready to start implementing some of the more the social-emotional curriculum, with looking at the zones of regulation, as others have mentioned, and making sure that students are able to identify their feelings. Another thing we're very, very conscious about is that we have basically 2.5 grade levels that have hardly been in the building. Our freshmen last year, who will be juniors, only had 3 quarters in the building. So they've not even had a full year. Only our upcoming seniors have actually been in the building for a full year. So looking at what that means to be in high school and what that means to be in our building and to be Urbana. And so we've got a lot of things planned to welcome all grade levels back, to have orientations for both freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and really kind of say, this is our building, we're back, and to really take back our building and build that community and have that sense of community, and that this is our school and we are here and we are better, Urbana better together, right? But to really put that into action. So we've got some plans coming up for that. And finally, our equity goal is twofold. It's to making sure that we have equitable access to a culturally responsive curriculum and teaching practices, and to ensure academic advancement through educational opportunities. And that sounds like a lot of words, but what that means is we're going to be looking at our traditionally marginalized students, our students of color who maybe aren't in our AP and AP prep courses. Last year, we had one of our AP US history teachers reach out to our students of color to encourage them to register for AP US history. And we saw an increase of students of color in that class section, in those sections, of 7 more students that wouldn't have registered. So just looking at different ways we can get students to be in our AP, students of color being in the AP classes and those strands. And then we're also going to be looking at implementing equitable grading and assessment practices in all the courses, making sure that what we're doing, looking at standards-based grading, all the work with Rick Wormley that we have coming up, looking at the standards-based grading and making sure that we are being equitable in what we're doing for all of our students, to make sure that they are being heard, and that we are making sure that all students' needs are being met. So those are our goals. They're much more in depth. I know that this has been a strange time. We did have the advantage of having Mr. Nance come and work on this document with us for a half a day. So we were able to get a lot of work done, and he had a hand in this. However, I do think that when he does come at the end of the month, that we will be looking at this again to make sure that we really have what we want going forward in our document. And that's all.
All right, thank you. Board, are there any questions?
Yes, thanks, Julie. One question that always comes up for me with regards to equity and learning for our students is, you mentioned about bringing in our marginalized students and our underrepresented students into the AP and AP prep classes. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested to know what we're going to be doing in the coming years, especially with Mr. Nance on board, to make sure that kids see themselves as AP worthy, as AP capable, even before freshman year, even working with 8th graders coming in so that they feel like they can excel. Because, I've heard from a lot of teachers that oftentimes by the time a student gets to AP level, say in junior or senior year, they don't feel like they're capable of reaching that level. And the work should have started a lot sooner. So I'm interested to know how our goals towards equity in that area will make sure that kids are learning way, way earlier. And then we have much larger classes of all different types of kids going through.
So I think one thing that will help with that is the AVID program being started at the middle school, and looking to continue that as it grows and moves to the high school, because the AVID program really does teach kids about how to see themselves in AP classes, how to see themselves as being college bound and that type of thing. So I think that the Avid will kind of channel that. And then if we can move that here to the high school and have that continue with the Avid in high school, I think that will be one way.
No, I agree with you. Continuity across the middle school classes and the learning in the high school is crucial to making sure those kids don't lose what they've gotten in middle school or feel very well prepared once they get to high school, because that's one thing is graduation rates are great, but I want all of our kids to feel that they're capable of excelling and pushing themselves to high levels much earlier in the process. And they don't feel defeated by the time they get to junior year and say, oh, I can't take that class. It's too hard for me. And they haven't been prepared for it. So I'm interested to know what's going to happen in the coming years with that. Thank you.
I think Kim was going to add.
Just to add to that, and the equity goals are part of all of our schools. And in a sense, we're doing equity audits at the district, at all of our schools. When we look at participation across all demographics or extracurriculars, when we look at attendance, when we look at our acceleration data, just across the board. And then really, the most important aspect as well is having those partnerships with our families. And that's one thing, as I've mentioned before, that we really learned through the pandemic, where historically maybe we had, for a family forum, it was just a small percentage of parents. It could have been 7 or 8. But then when we were able to do that virtually, we had 70, 80 parents. And then we also have to work with our families. Many of our families, may not be available at 6 o'clock in the evening. So we need to try to incorporate other times or other venues or record things as well. So we have to, it's not just middle school, high school, but as we look at all levels, just to make sure that, again, students feel safe and supported, and that all students feel included, and that we're involving our families as well.
And I was going to add, we actually have I thought Kim was going to add this too. We have 2 elementary buildings that are actually looking at very beginning level Avid. Dr. Williams and Yankee Ridge are both going to be our 2 elementary beginning stages of Avid. So we'll be starting even with, I think, 4th and 5th graders at those 2 buildings. I don't know if Dr. Wiemel is still on, but I do think a lot of the changes that we've made at the middle school level, I don't know, Joe, are you still there? Where we've kind of built in some of those acceleration, especially in the math pathway. I know we've been talking about how we can do some of those things in literacy. So Joe, if you want to kind of address Anne's question about kind of addressing some of that early acceleration for, especially in math, we are doing at middle level.
Sure. So over the last 3 years, I guess, we've really looked at pathways for students to be able to move into different levels of math or different grade levels of math, even based on their assessment scores and how they're doing across their classwork and teacher recommendation, et cetera, so that students can move more into the pathway towards advanced classes, so that they're on the pathway to taking Algebra 1 by 8th grade and then moving into AP Prep Geometry by their 9th grade year at a minimum. And we've had several students even surpass that. And so I had a meeting today with a student who's going to be an 8th grader next year and is already ready for geometry as an 8th grader because of this type of pathway that we've started in the last couple of years. And so what that will do is increase the number of students taking algebra by 8th grade, but then also then taking those AP Prep and AP classes in high school as well. And we're seeing a lot more growth and moving more students into that pathway. This past year, obviously, threw everything for a loop, but we'll get back to that this coming school year as well.
I had a quick question for Julie, if she's still on, Ms.
Yep.
Blixen. I was just curious, are you adding any new support systems, or do you have those in place for the students who are interested in taking these AP classes for the first time that might have some struggles in that class? Or
I think that through our counseling department, there may be some things in the works. I can't speak to them specifically, but whenever we are looking for students who maybe are interested in these programs, the counseling department does, reach out to students to help them. I can't speak to if they have anything specific. I'm sorry, I don't know that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And we'll still
Sorry.
have tutoring after school as we did previously. You know, we'll
And the
have that as well.
the 21st century things that we do have in place.
Other questions?
Yeah, if I could speak up, is it okay?
Mhm.
I want to build on your comment about, I'm assuming it's Mr. Davis that was encouraging people to get involved in APUSH. But I think we need to think about when we're talking about promoting this type of personal advancement, that we need to equip a cohort of students. A teacher can talk to a student, but another student talking to a student, I think, is more important. And it goes back to the discussion that Laura started tonight about student leadership. I think that, and so, Joe, I'm sure you're still there, but I know it would have to start at the middle school. But if we talk about changing attitudes about people that are able to take AP classes but are discouraged from taking AP classes, that we need to get amongst the peers, and the peers need to help break that chain. And so I would encourage, as you begin to think about this, that you begin to think about how you involve the student voice in encouraging fellow students. I know how difficult it would be for me to walk in to a room and be the only person that looks like me in a room and be able to succeed. And so if we're ever going to change that dynamic, it has to be done with more than one, and more than a teacher reaching out and getting two or three. I mean, I think it really has to be students talking amongst themselves and motivating them themselves. So that's my comment.
And John, I do. Oh, go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say it was actually Mr. Foley that was the APUSH teacher reaching out this year.
Sorry. Well,
Okay.
If it's Mark, that's even better.
Yes, he sent a very passionate. My son got that email. It was a very passionate kind of invitation for students to join. It was great. I was going to just add to your comment, John. I do think Principal Nash has talked about this in terms of he was one of those students, John, who was discouraged from being an AP, who did not think he could be successful in some of those higher level classes. So I think his story and his ability to connect with our students to get behind this initiative, and I know it was definitely one of the goals that he spoke to in all of his interview sessions, and he's had conversations with our team about this is something that is really important to him. So I do think we will hopefully be seeing some leverage and really making some gains in this area. So.
And
Don't take my comments to negate the role of the adult. The adult.
Oh, no.
The teacher is
I
still
was just
there,
sharing that.
We've got to motivate students to encourage other students.
And I also know that Principal Nance has been in contact with the new president of Parkland and really trying to encourage some dual credit classes and think more dual credit classes and looking at partnerships with them. So that can is something too that's on the horizon.
I was wondering if you could speak to how student growth is tracked in literacy and in math. Is it done just like a few points during the school year, or is it monthly, or?
So we'll be using the MAPS testing that was referred to by the other schools as well. And that is done 3 times a year. Previously, we've done the PSAT and the SAT. Well, this year they had canceled those. And but the MAP testing gives us more real-time data to work with and set more personal goals for each student rather than waiting for those twice-a-year tests. It's the NWEA MAP data.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Blixen.
Thank you, Ms. Blixen. So as you can see, we have a lot of intentional efforts around assessment practices, grading practices, SEL support. Just to fill in some holes too, you heard mentioned briefly Rick Wormley. He is world renowned, and we're very fortunate that we have a partnership with him. He's going to be doing professional development with all of our teachers. He also will be present at 2 of our program council sessions, beginning and end, so to tie things back to our district and school improvement plans. So we're really excited about that. So Rick Wormley, I encourage you to Google him or look at him at Twitter. He is so motivational, and you could just hear him talk forever and ever about grading practices. So we have that. And then I just wanted to fill in a hole just to make sure you heard CASEL mentioned a lot. So I just want to clarify that and make sure everyone knows what is CASEL. It's the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. And we keep mentioning the CASEL competencies. So those core competencies we want to instill across all grade levels for students and really reinforce those with staff too. And so those 5 competencies are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. I just wanted to make sure everybody, because that's something you'll hear a lot about CASEL. And you could just, once you really explore the CASEL resources, you could just swim and get lost in it. There's so many valuable resources with district frameworks, rubrics, walkthroughs that apply to classrooms and to buildings to make sure we're instilling all those competencies. So we refer to that quite a bit as well. And again, just want to thank our school improvement teams. They've done a lot of work. Again, this isn't just a one-day shot. They've really prepared multiple years for this. And then even as they recapped this last year to reflect, but then a lot of time and energy will be spent moving forward as we're constantly looking at this document and this work to see what we can do to best serve our students.
Any final questions? All right, thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Jason Liggett from UPTV for operating our cameras in our makeshift boardroom here tonight. He's got to get up and move cameras around and stuff he doesn't have to do in our traditional board space. So thank you for your yeoman's work tonight. 10.2 is discussion on our plans for families interested in home hospital instruction.
Great. So while John is switching presentations there, I did want to share. So John, that's the superintendent report. So it is the PDF, the orange covered one, ISBE resolution and plans for homebound. So while John's finding that, I wanted to introduce Catherine Tellez. So Catherine's sitting over there next to Angie. I don't know if we can swing the camera. Sorry, Jason, you just got up and moved it on me, and now I'm making you get up again. So yesterday was Catherine's first day. Catherine is our new director of marketing and communications. So she's going to be joining us at board meetings. So we're really excited that Catherine's here. I've been taking her around slowly to buildings. We have not made it to Gerber yet. So Jen, she is coming. We told her a little bit about it, but she's going to come and see your space as well. Today we went to the middle school and high school. So yeah, we're really excited that she's here, and everybody has been really excited to meet her. So I don't know, Catherine, do you want to say something? You don't have to. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Okay, thanks, Catherine. So, all right. Thank you, John. So again, I know this is going to be a little bit of a review because we talked about this, right before ISB announced the resolution and kind of basically mandated schools to return to full in-person instruction. But I also want to make sure that I know we had a father who came tonight and talked a little bit. And I do want to be able to talk to our public about next steps and what they can do moving forward if they have concerns about their students being in person. So as you know, on May 19th, the State Board of Education approved a resolution. We talked about that at one of our May meetings, declaring all schools to return to full in-person learning for all student attendance days when the school year begins this fall. There was a Robinson Schwartz presentation today. I know Brenda was on. I don't know if any other board members had a chance. It was recorded. I can always share that with you if you're interested. That is our attorneys. They did they've been doing these webinar sessions pretty regularly. So today's session was really interesting and they spoke to this. So I can share, they're going to be sharing the Zoom link with clients. So we'll get that eventually and I can pass that on. So as we talked about during our last meeting, part of this guidance is really saying to schools that remote learning in the context of what we've been doing pre-pandemic is not going to be something that they will sign off on schools continuing, that they are only encouraging schools, well, not really encouraging, but basically telling us that students who are both not eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine and also under a quarantine order are the only students who they will be eligible for the home hospital instruction. So we talked about that a little bit last time, so that's reviewed. So once the state superintendent, Carmen Ayala, makes the declaration and it does go into effect, which we anticipate will be soon. They've not made that declaration yet because there are several school districts across the state that are still in school. We're done, but as you know, Chicago Public Schools, they have at least, I think, another 2 weeks of school in session. There's some other Illinois districts that are still in session. So I anticipate as soon as all schools are out for the summer, this declaration will in fact go into effect, which will require remote learning to students who meet both of the following conditions. Again, not eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine or under a quarantine order by the local public health department. So there has been some recent changes. We've been talking to you all year about our contact tracing and that we're following the Illinois Department of Public Health decision tree. One of the most significant changes, I think, for us and for us being able to come back in person in the fall is the fact that fully vaccinated and asymptomatic persons are not required to quarantine. This is going to be huge for us. Most of our staff are vaccinated. We're really pushing as much as we can to incentivize all of our staff to be vaccinated. But again, we're not mandating that as of yet. And we're not able to because the vaccines are still under an emergency order and have not officially been federally FDA approved. But this is going to be really a big deal for our nurses. I know the HR department spends a lot of time talking about contact tracing and who's in quarantine and who isn't. We have a position posted right now. I know you all get our HR postings for a COVID, what are we calling that? District public liaison person or public health liaison? Oh, okay. Community liaison. And so that person will basically take over the role that Angie's been serving, which is working directly with our district nurse and our school nurses to work with the public health department on who is quarantined and who isn't. I think our efforts around contact tracing have really helped us not have to, we have not had any significant outbreaks and we've not really had positive cases kind of spreading from the school level, as we've discussed when we talked about the data dashboard a little bit. But the fact that we do not have to quarantine fully vaccinated staff will really make a big difference to us when the school year starts. I just wanted to mention that. So what is our response going to be for the school year? So districts would be required to provide remote learning to students who meet those two criteria, who are under quarantine or who are not able to be vaccinated. The bulk of that population will again be our students under 12 because they're currently not able to receive the vaccine. So in response, we have been kind of under this concurrent, simultaneous, synchronous model since January. I know I know at least Ravi and a couple of our Laura has a elementary student who have kind of been living under this model right now where our elementary teachers, they teach to the students that are in the room and they also teach to the students that are in Zoom. So we anticipate at the elementary level, as our unvaccinated students do have to maybe be quarantined. Our elementary teachers have learned to do this and some of them have become masters at it. That we will have to kind of use that concurrent, simultaneous, synchronous model when we return. And we have teachers that have to quarantine or students that have to quarantine. That'll be what we are able to do at the elementary level. We've talked a lot about having dedicated subs that we will hire specifically to address the fluidity that this will cause at the elementary level. I know subs have been hard to come by. So Angie is working with her team and we're going to have a new sub coordinator here. Our person we've had is moving out of state. But we'll work with that person to make sure that we have subs available when we do need to have a class or a teacher go into quarantine for any reason. And we also, part of this, our response, I'm going to talk about our survey here in just a minute, is we continue to find families in need of devices, which surprises us because we feel like we have kind of saturated that and asked every single person if they have a device. But I'll show you some survey data here in a second that we will do our very, very best and do everything that we can to make sure that every family has a device at home. So in the event they have to quarantine, they have a device right there and they don't have to come to the school to pick one up if that happens. So again, we've talked about this a little bit. The school code does allow student remote learning for our students that have a medical need. And we actually have a board policy, 6185, that speaks to this a little bit, this medical certification. Again, for the parent that was here tonight, we're going to do our very, very best to address the individual educational needs of all of our students who do not want to return in person and really have conversations with them about what their needs really are. So I'm not going to go into these in depth, but I wanted to add them to the presentation so they're out in the public again. This is where we talked at the meeting in May about what is homebound instruction. And basically we have a medical certification form that we are getting out to families. And this basically involves generally 5 hours of instruction per week. Some of that instructional time will be in person. I know we have some families who on the survey indicated, they're not comfortable with that yet. So we'll have to work with them individually on what their comfort level might be. But there is a requirement right now that at least, I think, is it 2 of those hours, Todd, are in person? Yes. I think so. Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Yep. And if a student has an IEP, the student's team will review the medical certification and determine appropriate services and placement. Now, most of these medical forms will be coming in over the summer because we really we're going to reach out. Well, we already have reached out to all of those families. So Todd will be looking at those. I know we have a district nurse. We have other IEP team members that we can pull in to help us kind of make the determination of what the best needs for the student might be. But those conversations will be happening throughout the summer. Again, the instruction can be we've been doing a lot of our instruction via Zoom, but it can also be other electronic media outlets as well. So to this survey, I guess this is new information that I wanted to share with the board. So several of you who are parents participated in this survey. This was a heavily responded survey. I think this is the best results we've had from one of our electronic survey opportunities. So there was a lot of interest in families sharing their opinion about the return to school. We had over 1,000 responses, which for us via survey is really great. With 27 families indicated that their children might be unable to attend in person due to a medical condition or actually due to some other concerns. So as you heard from our family member who came this evening. Out of those 27 responses, we had one was in early childhood, 20 at elementary, which we really expected because our elementary students, again, cannot have the vaccine yet. 8 at middle school, 9 at high school. Another interesting detail was we had 120 families indicate in the survey that they need a device. So we're going to reach out to all of those families individually and find out what their needs are. To the next one. So John, can you flip to the home hospital, the form? So Todd's office has already sent out to those 27 families, again, that indicated that they are not wanting to return or unable to return due to medical needs or for other reasons. Can you make it a little bigger, John? And we have shared this document with those families. I just wanted to walk through it a little bit with you about it. So if you could scroll down, John, to, yep. So right here, we kind of talk a little bit about the 2 hours of instruction and what some of the protocols are. As we shared last time, it has been our practice that we typically do our very best to use of course, we will be using USD 116 teachers, but we also do our very best to connect the students with their actual teacher. That may not happen in every single case, in every single situation. We'll offer that additional stipend or that additional duty to the classroom teacher, and they may not be able to take that extra commitment on at this time. So Todd and I have talked about once we have touched base with all 27 families and we actually see what the needs are. Again, we can take this request at any time. It doesn't have to come in right now as we're asking in the month of July. So people can change their minds and reach out to us and sign up for this at any point. But we are going to try to do some pre-planning to make sure that we can match these students with their actual teachers. So of course, we want to use vaccinated staff members. We'll expect our staff members to wear a mask when they're working. If you can scroll up, John. And then, of course, all of the other protocols there. So the main thing is really getting this form, especially for our families who need the physician verification piece. I know sometimes it takes a little while to get an appointment with your doctor. So for our public that are listening, I know we've shared this with the families who have indicated that they want to go this route, but for our other families, here's the contact information. We have it on another slide. We can fax you the form. We can send the form directly to your doctors. And we'll do whatever we can to kind of work with families, again, on what their specific needs are. Todd, are there any other things in here that you would like to highlight while we've got the form up?
I know to some of us, faxing is kind of an antiquated technology, but a lot of times we'll get the homebound forms back from the doctor's office via fax. They prefer to do that. So that's why we make sure that we have that available for them.
John, scroll up a little bit more. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to. So on this form, we've actually included some roles for the parents, some of the, expectations for students in this. Keep going, John. I thought there was. I think that's it. Yeah. So this really speaks a little bit about, you can go back a little bit, how we're going to keep the team involved, especially for our IEP students who go this route. The case managers are very heavily involved. The IEP teams are very heavily involved. For our students that are not 504 IEP, we'll do our best to really work with the principal and work through Todd's department to really meet the individual needs of the students. So I think if you go back to the PowerPoint, the last slide really was just giving you Sharon's email and contact information to request that form, or if you need to send the form back, or if you just have questions about it, it is also on the medical certification form that we've shared out with families. Questions?
I had a couple quick questions
Yes.
for you. Number one, I'm just curious, what if a family has an older child over 12 and they chose not to get the vaccine? And let's say they had one of these, but not two of these qualifications for the homebound.
So
what would
we
happen in a case like that?
We actually do have a couple families who had multiple children who indicated, I have a third grader, I have an eighth grader, I have an 11th grader. So because we're not required to offer the remote at the middle school and high school, it'll be a lot harder when they have 6 different teachers, or middle school and high school is so course specific and not teacher specific. So what we're planning to do is just like we would for a student who missed 3 or 4 days of school for whatever reason, we will collect work. And you're talking about when they're in quarantine.
Right.
Yes. So we'll collect work for them. We'll, do our very best to coordinate with the parents to get that work sent home for the students. Okay. I think if we have teachers who are able to handle, our middle school and high school people didn't have as much experience with the synchronous simultaneous instruction as they did at the elementary, but there may be instances where a student can still Zoom into a class for something specific and take their class that way. We will still provide a homebound instructor if we have middle school and high school students. I don't know, Todd, if you want to speak to what that kind of looks like for the middle school, high school students.
Sure.
Pretty much the same thing.
Because home, and just one other thing, home hospital instruction has been around a very, very long time.
Yes.
Than I've been in this job 10 years, so it's been around longer than 10 years.
Yes, definitely.
So, even under more traditional kind of circumstances, the homebound instructor is an instructor, but also a facilitator with the child's teachers, helping collect the work, providing help, support, instruction, connection back to the classroom teacher, and that sort of thing. So I think that model is something that our teachers are comfortable with. So if a child is quarantined, I think it would be a very similar sort of model for the short term in terms of gathering that work and getting it to them while they're under quarantine as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And Brenda, I was going to add one comment too.
No
I think to go along with what you were asking, the state is really, really encouraging anybody over 12 to get the vaccine. So that is why they really are not pushing remote or blended learning for the middle school and high school students, because they are able to be vaccinated. So we really, really want, I know there's some situations where there's students who aren't able to, for medical reasons or medication reasons and things like that. But that is why the state is really not making that blended remote option available at all to middle school and high school, because those students really should and could be vaccinated, hopefully.
Okay. I just had one other quick question. I was surprised, like you, were the families able to keep the devices over summer?
Yeah.
Okay. I was really surprised that only 38 students for homebound right now, but then 120 families say they need
and I think we were very clear that if students needed the device for summer school or summer instruction or any additional learning opportunities, of which there are myriad opportunities, or if they needed them for parent-teacher communication, or if there's any reason they needed them, that they could retain the device over summer and starting next year. So.
And I was just wondering, do you have, I'm sure you have a log of who picked up the devices and everything?
Yep, we've tracked, we've assigned them to the students, so those are going to remain assigned to the students. And then when they return them, they get unassigned from them.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious about that, because that's a huge number going from, and I know there was a huge push from the district to make sure everyone had gotten devices.
Yep.
It had been publicly out there for several times. So,
and as we dive into it this summer, I'm curious to see kind of if those were kids who were assigned devices and returned them and want it back for fall, or if there are students who were never assigned a device. But either way, we have some things in place right now. We had a meeting earlier today to make sure we have enough devices for all the students in the one-to-one rollout and then all of the students who need them.
Okay, thank you.
We were just as surprised, Brenda. So that's why we're really going to, after all the emails and phone calls and home visits. So we're really going to dig into that data to make sure that those 120 families, their needs are met. So
I got a comment on what was just said and then a question.
Sure.
So the email I got as a parent basically said, if you have a device, return it. I don't think it had all these stipulations, like if you want it for summer classes or whatever, then keep it. It's like, bring it back. And we didn't have one, so I was like, whatever. But probably those 120 people are people that returned it, I would assume. But then the question though is for the the traditional home hospital, that's, I think, well understood, a complex process and a complex way to teach kids. But for the newer option of if you are not able to receive a vaccine and you also are in quarantine by the health department, do you really have to go through the process of getting a doctor's note and all that jazz? Because by the time you do all that, your 2 weeks are up.
Yeah, not for that.
No, that's one of the few exceptions.
So you're just automatically in it.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yes. So yes, if you're unvaccinated under 12 and you're in quarantine, then you're going to be getting 2 weeks of instruction, either through your teacher, Zoom, you joining their Zoom, or we're going to have dedicated subs who are going to work directly with those students. So. Good question.
But the option that no longer exists is probably what the public comment parent wanted, which is my children cannot be vaccinated. I just don't feel comfortable with them going to school. For those people, you say, go to school or be truant, right?
No, well, no. So what we're going to do, and we've had a couple of those parents reach out to us at the middle level, and I'm kind of working with Dr. Wiemelt on those. We are talking about what are some options that they could come to school for certain things, and maybe part of their day might be homeschool. And part of their day, they can come in person for certain things. So I think it is just going to be a lot of individual conversations with families that we've had very few families who have reached out to us who want that option. I think most people are anxious for their kids to be back in school full time. So for the families like Mr. Frazier who came tonight, we will just kind of work with them and see what their needs are. And again, we don't want anybody to be truant, but we will do what we can. But yes, the full remote option is no longer a choice right now.
Well, on all the public messaging, it sounds like that is not an option of what you're talking about. Because like my wife and I have talked, and we totally would do that, or we would not have our soon to be third grader in kindergarten go to school because they can't get vaccinated. And then say in October they get vaccinated and then they'll be fine.
Yep.
So, I mean, we haven't spoken up because they didn't hear that was an option anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is an option, I guarantee you there'll be hundreds of people signing up for it.
Oh yeah.
Right. But I think that is why the state superintendent is not making it an option.
Saying if you're willing to work with people and do those things, then
well, we're willing to work with
people because I will email you tomorrow saying I'm interested in it.
Well, the option will be mostly homeschool. I mean, that's something that I think some of our families are considering is that they, if they are that concerned and they have the ability to homeschool, then I think that's something we're encouraging them to do. But if their classes, like these couple of middle school families, there are like a few things that they can be partially enrolled and they can come for those couple of things. And then, for the settings that involve more in person or more physical contact, then those students might go home for the rest of the day. So, and
I guess I would add that is also not new. That is accounted
new.
For in board policy, that partial enrollment where students have been, partially homebound or in a private school for part of their day and with us part of the day, assuming we have space to put students in. That's something we work with families with as well.
Right. I would say, even if they're that, from the way this reads, they would still have to come for those 2 hours a week. Is that correct?
Well, they don't have to come to the school. They do have to meet with the instructor. 2 hours a week. They can meet at McDonald's, they can meet at the library, they can meet off site. We can maybe set aside a space maybe in the school. I don't know, have we ever done that? Like they can meet at the school for
Yes.
those 2 hours, somewhere private maybe, if we can work that out. But
The other thing that I worry about too is I believe this is all tied to money. And I'm curious to see how that will impact, you know, if and how it would impact our district if we're showing so many percentage of students doing, you know, not showing up at school. I know we get a certain amount per day per pupil, you know, from the state. I forget what exactly that's called, but you know what I'm talking about, correct?
Yeah,
So that's what I'm curious. I think it's tied to that. But.
Any further questions? All right, thank you. 10.3, John Guzmer is going to lead a discussion on the SAPA update.
So, as you might have heard this year, they instituted a new Online Personal Privacy Act for student information that very conveniently
We can't hear you anymore.
Okay, can you hear me now? Better. This website that we have up here is basically goes over all of the student data privacy things that we have in place for the district. And most importantly, the new one, SOPA, that is going into effect, like I said, at the end of this month. And I want to really quickly, before we jump into SOPA, go over kind of some of the other things that have come before this that have led up to this. So FERPA is established in 1974 and was kind of completely revamped in 2012. So prior to SOPA, that was both the oldest and the newest guidelines on student data. And that basically allows provisions for students to access their student records, students, guardians, and parents, and then the transfer of those records when they turn 18. So on this webpage, which will be going live later this evening after the meeting, there's some helpful videos that kind of describe all of the things that people have access to. COPA was a very targeted thing that was broadly across the internet for students under 13, so that students under 13 weren't giving data to vendors and apps. That's why whenever you go to an app on the internet, it always asks you how old you are. And if you click I'm under 13, it basically either kicks you out or has some additional provisions for you. SEPA provides protections for children, students in schools, on their devices, and on the internet. This ensures that in order to receive federal E-rate money, that we have protections in place. As the district, we have a dual content filtering system. We have a firewall that we recently upgraded earlier this year that protects all the content throughout the district to make sure that everybody's safe on the internet. And there's kind of different levels for students and staff. Starting this year, we've also rolled out to student devices, the Go Guardian, so that even when they're outside of the network, the district network and the bounds of the district, that they're still able to browse safely and able to have some protections in place. And that has some additional things where we can do flagged activity so that if there's particularly disturbing things that we can be notified and make sure that they get the proper help that they need. So those are the basics that have led up to SOPA. SOPA adds a lot of extra regulatory guidance for us and extra things that we get to do. So I will go through those really quickly. There's a video also on the webpage. And one of the big things that the SOPA Act does is that it mandates that we publicly state some of the things. So in addition to being informational, the webpage that we're posting also helps us meet our regulatory guidelines. So in the consent agenda, one of the things is that the district must appoint a data privacy officer. So if we pass that, that will be me after tonight. That basically just makes it so I'm the one who gets in trouble if we're violating the Student Online Personal Protection Act. So, and then I am also the one who will be supervising, making the agreements with operators, which I'll get to in just a second. The operator data privacy agreements are agreements with any application, software, website that has access to our student data, including to things as little as just student names or student IDs or student email addresses. So that is a very broad definition that includes basically any software that we use in the district. So we have to enter into a data agreement with all of these software applications, which there's a large number of them, as I said. The good news is because we're a little bit coming into this a little later, they've changed a lot of the ISB guidance, and they've added some things to make this a little easier for school. So we are entering into the Student Data Privacy Consortium, which is something that allows you to manage those agreements and kind of work through them a little more quickly. I will click here. At the bottom is a list of all of our data privacy agreements. And if we go in here, this shows the ones that we've done so far. There's about 64, which we're about 80th percentile of districts I've looked at so far. I'm hoping by the end of summer, before students come back into session for the fall semester, that we'll have probably well over 100 or 200 of these agreements in place. So the other part of that, which, back to my tab here. Oh. So the other part of that with those agreements is that we every year inform teachers of what agreements we have in place and what software and applications they're allowed to use within the district. It's required to be every year, so we'll send out a kind of formal notice, but this will be on the website and they can look at those whenever they want. There's also a process in place where staff can request additional data agreements with additional softwares if the one that they want is not in that list. So the other things that we are required to post is our response to data breaches. And this is pretty standard in the Act, 30 days of the breach and 60 days for third-party providers. Parental rights, this is kind of building on FERPA, but this is how parents can get access to what data is being shared with outside vendors. And parents also have access to this site, and each of those agreements has a Exhibit B, which has a very detailed list of what information is being shared with what providers. And for most of them, it's very limited. Some of them, like Skyward and some of the other things, it's a lot more information. But those are agreements that we've entered into for conducting school business. So we also are required to have reasonable security procedures and practices. We have been trying to do this in general because it's just a good idea. But we are listing those here, and then the LTC, which is through the Regional Office of Education, has some reasonable security practices that they've laid out, that they're just listed so that we can meet the compliance with the act here. But we are always continuing to provide the best security and practices that we can in the district. So the last two things I already mentioned, that we annually list the tools that are available. And then we're also required to list all of our policies for student personal data. Most of these were put out through press so that they're consistent across the state. And then we also are listing here our acceptable use policy and access to electronic networks and educational technologies. So we've done a lot of work this last couple months to get where we are on SOPA. So I'm happy with what we've done and happy that we're complying with the legal needs for the district. So if any of you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Board members, any questions? I have a few, I guess. I have to deal with this in my line of work. I have to deal with the user data online and with Yahoo, and there's tons of federal requirements. And as a result, I have to take lots of training. So I just wonder, is like staff training part of our of SOPA? Is it something we were required to do, other than just the one sign off that teachers get once a year, I guess, that you were talking about?
There's not any staff training that I'm aware of for it. We will probably at the beginning of the year mention it, especially this first year, and kind of go over the 2-minute quick tutorial, just so they know that if they're using software in their classrooms, that they need to make sure that it's been vetted through this process. But there's not a requirement I'm aware of for a in-depth teacher training.
And will I guess, will this be something that parents sign off on during centralized registration in terms of like the family consent forms, or is this?
They're not required to sign off on SOPA, but we are required to notify them. And so that's through the website. So they'll be in the same place that we have a lot of our other things that we're required to post for RFPs. There'll be a place for student data privacy on the front page of the website. So if anybody wants to look at that, they can. But we aren't going to send anything out.
And this has all been translated, I'm assuming, to?
You can translate it to any language through the automatic translator. We've been kind of working on it the past couple of weeks, so we haven't done the internal translations, but that's something we can work on in the next couple of weeks.
Great. Any further questions? All right, thank you. Okay. 10.4, Dr. Aubrey Tatum is going to lead a discussion on central office relocation leasing agreement.
Okay, great. So all the board members have a leasing agreement in front of you. And as you know, and as our public knows, and one of the reasons we're sitting here in Urbana Middle School today, and instead of our boardroom space at central office, is we have been having some facility issues, and we've discussed that at the board level regarding our roof. We are going to be working with some roofers to get our roof repaired. That hasn't happened yet because of COVID. Materials and supplies are in very high demand, and so the roofers have not been able to get the necessary materials to get started on the project. However, the roof is kind of was the impetus to us having the conversation and basically going back to the long-term vision for the district. I know we've talked about the 10-year facilities plan that was Paul was part of that, and John was part of that. The big group. I think that was in 2017.
It was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a few years. And central office relocating, and central office was in the kind of top 3, along with making sure that we completed the renovation at Thomas Paine and also Wiley. So those are still big needs, and central office is at the kind of top of that list at this point, more so out of necessity than out of want. We have also hired some new positions recently to help us with some of our ESSER grant funding and some of the programs and curriculum needs that have come with us really talking about learning renewal. So we have a couple of postings right now. We've hired a couple people. We're sharing spaces basically in central office all over. We have people in closets, people, 2 or 3 people in rooms that really should only probably have 1 or 2 people. Parking has been an ongoing issue for us. So the roof really pushed us out there and made us really start thinking about spaces and where we might be able to go in our community. Some of our needs are making sure that we stay central, making sure that we're on a central bus line, making sure we have adequate parking, just all of those. We have a boardroom space that we can continue to meet in. We hopefully will be able to continue to meet in our boardroom. So we basically went out into the community. We looked at and discussed some other options. There were other options available to us, but that were very not close, not central, not easy for our staff to get to, or people or families who just need to access central office. So we have been in recent discussions with MTD, with Mass Transit District, about leasing space that they have available at 1101 at their building at 1101 East University. They own that site and they've been there, I think, since 2003. They have 2 pod spaces available that were previously housed, I think, Health Alliance, or just, was it Health Alliance or just Carl?
It was Carl IT.
Carl IT was in the MTD space currently, and they were there for several years. They recently vacated, I think, about 3 years ago, and no one has moved into that space. Several years ago, I know the central office team, prior to me returning to the district, walked through the space with the previous superintendent and the administrative team and probably a couple of our facilities board members, and looked at the space before, but we really had other needs at that time that were a priority, and Thomas Paine being one of them, and we really didn't move forward. But at this point, I think it is, I love Paul saying about our bill coming due. I think our bill has finally come due to really seriously look at leasing another space. I know we just sold some bonds and we have working cash funds that I think will help us be able to look at entering into a leasing agreement and be able to actually afford it. Carol shared our actual budget projections for Thomas Paine. So we are going to actually be able to fund that project fully, which was good news for us to hear. And she's going to talk a little bit about our budget, our very, very tentative budget for next year. So because we have some ESSER funding, which will allow us to pay for some of our curriculum and some of those other assessment curriculum staffing positions, that'll free up additional funds for the district to really seriously look at a leasing agreement. So what you have in front of you tonight, we haven't made this public yet because we had to discuss this via a closed session earlier, which is what we did today at 6:30. This is the first open discussion regarding the intergovernmental agreement between Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit and USD 116. We will bring this back again. I know technically this is our last meeting of the year, but we, knowing that this is something that we really want to bring before you before we recess for the summer in July, we will probably have to have a special meeting to bring this back for a second discussion and a formal vote.
All right. Board members, are there any questions? Just want to make a statement that this is not a long-term lease. This is we're not giving up on the district's vision for a central office that's truly central, that's in the middle of our community. This is just a stopgap while we plan for the eventual permanent home of central office and adult education. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
This will come back to a vote for us at a special meeting.
At a special meeting.
Probably before the end of the month. 10.5, Board of Education goals. So this is something I wanted to do as a board together to kind of initialize a brainstorming session for topics that we would like to discuss in study sessions over the next term, as well as specific goals that might have been deferred because of COVID. Just sort of a brainstorming session so we can get them out there and get community feedback on them. And then when we come back in August, we can organize the goals and try to lay them out over the next academic year for us to work on. There are specific things that we know we have to do, such as election boundary redistricting. There's going to be some work coming to us from our racial equity task force group and things like that. But I'd like to open the floor up for our members to discuss things they would like to look at as a board.
I would like to see a couple of things, Paul. I know I was in on a training with the Illinois Association of School Boards, and they actually have some really good equity trainings out there where our division leader could come and lead those for us. And the other thing I think we really need to look at is to possibly review our board policies with them. I know it's been quite a while since that's been done. I know it's a long, tedious process. I was in on the last time, which has been several years ago. And the other thing I think would be important is just to have a board retreat, since we have new board members and everything, and that's actually facilitated by Perry Hill, our division director. So I know those are three very important things in my book. I know it involves outside people, but I think it would be very important for our district to kind of look into some of these and getting them started.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ann.
Sorry if I'm interrupting any of the online members. You started off talking about some of the stuff, the map redistricting and the racial equity work, especially since we passed the resolution. It's been how many years since we passed our racial equity resolution?
That was 2018.
2018, yeah. So I'd like to review how, if we do review policy, how that's working, that's feeding into that resolution. John had mentioned earlier, I do want to complete our initial work on getting student involvement on the board. It's great to get the high school kids on, but as it was alluded that even if middle school kids could tag on with the high school kids and we can get some kind of comprehensive plan together, that would be great. And the self-evals for the board, since we do have two new members, I think it is important that we review what our personal goals are and also refresh our training. If people need any kind of OMA training, refresher courses, or I'm trying to think what the other stuff is. The
OMA and the para, the PDLT, I think.
Yeah.
Finance too.
And yes.
Tax policy.
Yes, thank you. Those are all really good refresher courses that we need to do. But and this is more of a district plan, but the board is actively involved in strategic planning. So I'd like to know how our racial equity work is going to feed into strategic planning, because we're at the end, like at the end of our strategic plan because COVID kind of sidelined us. And that's a long list. I think that's going to keep us pretty busy for the full year, but
yeah, I think we're gonna have more than enough work to tackle in a year. We're gonna probably, when we come back, have to try to structure it and get some prioritization going. But this is just a spitballing, discussion here. Anyone else?
I want to encourage us to go beyond just student representation at the board, but talk about student leadership within the schools, within the middle school and within the high school.
Something I'd like to have as a study topic, if possible. I'm a data guy, so I hate to throw us at Kim, but I like to have kind of an in-depth talk on student assessment and data collection and tracking student growth. I think that's it's going to drive a lot of what we do going forward. So it'd be great for us to understand that at a deeper level.
And that is like great timing, Paul, because like you've been hearing in all the plans, everybody's been talking about the NWEA map, which is going to be really, really new for us. Our teachers are getting training. I think it would be great for us to bring, we could do our own, but to bring in one of the map people too, to really do an in-depth presentation about what MAP is and all the different, we get student growth data from it. We get some other real important student achievement and attainment kind of data from it. So it will be something I'm really excited we're able to move in that direction, because it will definitely give us a much more in-depth look at our aggregate groups as well as individual students. So I think that is great timing.
Anyone else?
I just thought of one more thing. It's not really a board goal. It's just a tack on a to-do list, is that we need to review our committee work for the board moving forward and how that feeds into everything we've updated.
Yeah, I was hoping this discussion would lead into that, with people who have particular interests on goals that we tie to a committee work, and then we could get people paired up with committees coming from their own personal interest.
Paul, I'm assuming this is like a first run, lay everything out on the table, and then we'll have maybe an in-depth through the board retreat process or whatever to refine our work down to a workable amount that is made a little more specific to a timeline, so that we can measure ourselves against progress and put meat on each of these particular things that we're bringing up. So along those lines, the actual last time that we had a facility committee, the actual first project from that was not Thomas Paine, but was Yankee Ridge.
Yes.
And so it's been a good 5, 6, 7 years since we've had a facilities committee that has actually met and looked at things. I see Corey Boaz is on the meeting now, but that brings up that we've got other facility issues that we've identified, and we probably need to get the group back together and take another look at how we can prioritize and spend the available money in the most effective way possible. That's one thing. And then the other is to take a look at our forward momentum on our curriculum issues. I know that math curriculum right now is being worked on, but we used to have a curriculum plan where every few years we looked at a different curriculum area and kept an ongoing process to keep our curriculum issues current with the way things were developing. So that's also something that I would think that we should look forward to.
All right, anyone else? Okay, great. Board members, be prepared to take this, back to the communities and get more input from them, and to have a further discussion when we come back in August about making these timed and measurable and prioritized. So thanks a lot. So this is great. Going on, 11.0, we have our consent agenda for action items. We have the minutes for our May 18th business meeting, our June 1st study session. We have bills and checks to the amount of the Ed Fund for $934,000, operation and maintenance bills for $63,000, bond and interest fund bills for $46,000, transportation fund bills for $20,000, working cash bonds for $222,000, tort for $56,000, life safety levy for $10,000, payroll, salary and benefits for $4.4 million, and Urbana adult ed for $97,000. In our packets were a list of personnel items, a long list because at the end of the year, but I don't think there's anything that needs to be called out. Oh, okay. would you like to announce that now or just rolled in? Oh, is it? Oh, sorry. It's a long consent agenda. I missed at the end. 11.4 interfund loans. The approval we requested to repay as many of the interfund loans as possible into the working cash fund, and a payment transfer for interest as of June 30th as a permanent transfer of funds. The amount of transfers will be in the actual amounts of the interstate interest earned through June 30th, 2021. Interest earned in the working cash and bond interest funds will permanently transfer to the ed fund, which we typically do. We do this every year. The approval of the June bills for payment. We have a resolution declaring the intent to retain interest earnings as interest and not to accumulate as principal. We have 11.7, which is the pledge for $3,300 of financial support for self-made kings, which we discussed at a prior meeting. We have the appointment for our district data privacy officer, John Gutzmer. 11.10 is a resolution authorizing demolition and removal of 906 South Race Street. It's one of the buildings on our campus, middle school, secondary campus. 11.11, resolution authorizing and directing the sale or disposal of personal property, weeding logs from Wiley and Yankee Ridge and some of our other schools. 11.12, our secondary campus site improvement bid. So it was a bid to Deuce Construction Company in the amount of their base bid proposal for $154,500. 11.13 is a U of I intergovernmental agreement to extend the existing intergovernmental agreement between the Board of Education and the University of Illinois and USD 116 for 1 year. This is for Orchard Downs, right, typically.
The agreement, it is a decrease, and normally they give us $100,000. We've met with them several times. This spring, they did ask us to decrease the amount because, as you know, the Orchard Downs community, the housing area is typically an international housing community, and a lot of the international families have not been traveling because of COVID. They've not been able to be here for the last, I'd say for the last 2 years, they've seen a significant decline there. And they, at their request, said that the $100,000 was very burdensome to them at this point. So we've met, we extended the agreement for a 1-year extension at a rate of $50,000, hoping that our enrollment and those families will return to Orchard Downs and return back to King School. But right now, that is the difference in the amount. And for board members who have been here and know that traditionally is $100,000 a year. So,
and
it's like $365,000. Yeah, it used to be $365,000, right?
It's steadily declined over the past decade.
Yes.
11.14 is our last item on our consent agenda. Is the administrative personnel item. So, Angie. Oh, yeah. We're struggling to find a mic that has batteries.
We have been replacing batteries.
I'm praying that this one lasts the whole meeting.
I know.
Well, while we're waiting, I will move the consent agenda.
Well, Angie's getting ready to share a very, very short statement about our new AP.
Putting a motion on the floor shouldn't get in the way of that.
Yep.
All right. After graduating from the University of Illinois, Mr. Chad Musselman began teaching at Ogden Grade School as a junior high science teacher. After one school year there, Mr. Musselman accepted a science teaching position at his alma mater, Unity High School in Tolono. After 6 years teaching and coaching football at Unity and 8 years at Villa Grove High School, Mr. Musselman spent several years teaching chemistry at Centennial High School in Champaign. For the past 3 years, Mr. Musselman has served as the assistant principal of Mark Denman Elementary School in Danville. He becomes highly recommended as both an effective administrator and teacher evaluator. Mr. Musselman has stated he is extremely excited and appreciative of the opportunity to become part of the Urbana School District and a staff member of Dr. Preston Williams Junior School. At this time, we are coming to the Board of Education with a recommendation to hire Mr. Chad Musselman to serve as the next assistant principal at Dr. Williams School.
So there's been a motion made to accept the consent agenda. If there isn't a request to move any single item off of the consent agenda, I would welcome a second.
I'll second that.
Any discussion from the board? Roll call, please.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Orr,
Yes.
Member Hassanadka,
Yes.
Member Hall,
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Exum,
Yes.
President Pulaski.
Yes, the consent agenda passes. And welcome to the district. 12.1 is our gifts. Valeria Sobel from Urbana donated a Yamaha flute to Urbana Middle School. Dan Gothel donated $100 to the Josh Gothiel Music Award Fund. Deborah Katz Downey and Stephen Downey donated the following items to Urbana High School: 14 assorted nonfiction reference books for the library and foam, handmade feather medieval style weapons for the drama department. Peggy Buck donated floral and art supplies to Urbana Adult Ed. And the following donated a total of $75 to UMS Broadway on Vine: Jennifer Straub, Andrea Kirkland, Rodrigo Schofield, and David Cooper. Entertain a motion to accept the gifts.
I move to accept the gifts and send a thank you note.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Orr,
Yes.
Member Hassanadka,
I will have to abstain due to Jennifer Stroud being my wife.
Member Hall,
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Pulaski.
Yes, 12.3 is renewal of our insurance. Carol?
Good evening, everyone. Normally at this time of the year, we talk about and I'm presenting our insurance renewals, but this year it's probably one of the few times I don't have that information available. We've been working on this since February, getting insurance renewals, but as you probably understand, this is a tough insurance year, a very hard market throughout the nation. But specifically, we've had a few bad years as far as losses, and our insurance companies are not wanting much to do with Urbana right now. So our brokerage company has gone out and is getting quotes from as many sources as they can find, all of the markets that they've gone to. Some are willing to look at property, but not the liability side. So more than likely, I will be bringing something back that will have possibly one or two or maybe even three different carriers to cover us. There's not one carrier that wants to basically do all of this. We've had they gave me information. It's not something that I've tracked because that's our insurance, normally our insurance company's problem, and we pay our premiums and file our claims like we normally do for our losses that we have. We even hold back on some claims and don't file them because we want to make sure that we keep our losses down as much as possible. But these past 5 years have been really tough. And we've had, they gave me information of the last 10 years, I think we've had like 1.1 million in losses over those 10 years. 940,000 came in the last 5. So the last 5 years have been really rough. We've had tornado, we've had hailstorms, and we've had liability claims. So we've had a lot of things that are going on. But just to say that, just so you know that a month ago, they told me they thought our premiums might go up about 25%. That was before we got to this point. So it is not going to be a good year for insurance. We are doing everything we can to get the best rates. That's why we're taking this extra 2 weeks to try to get some more quotes and see what else we can do. But just understand that I will try to do the best I can, but we're going to get to some point where we're going to have to be insured. And we will unfortunately have to pay whatever that is, which means our premiums will probably go up more than 25% this year. We do have potentially another meeting before the end of June. So if that happens, I have something to bring back, I will do it at that time. Otherwise, I guess I just asked the board to authorize me to bind coverage before July 1, and I will do that as I always do, but normally I get the board's approval and then go back and bind that coverage. I don't think we're going to have that opportunity to do that this year. So if I can have it done by the end of the month and we have a special meeting, we'll do it then. Otherwise, I'll bring it back in August and hopefully have better news for you. So, but right now, I just wanted to bring that to you. And so you're basically just authorizing me to do the best that I can. And I've checked with them. I had a discussion with them today. They said they are going out to talking to all carriers that do schools. So it's not just the broker that we have. I mentioned going to somebody else and they said they're talking to everybody. So wish I had better news, but.
All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any questions or further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I need a real clarification on exactly what this motion says.
Well, the motion says, well, I guess I don't want to, who made the motion?
I did. I did. Do you want me to read this?
I think what we're doing is giving Carol the authority to go out because we don't have a reputation.
Right.
Insurance coverage tonight. And you're authorizing to go out and get the best representative possibly get.
It was in the memo. It was in the memo that I provided. It mentioned that it was basically authorizing me to bind coverage prior to July 1.
Yes. So the motion on the floor is authorizing Carol Baker to act as an agent for the board to find the best insurance coverage possible before July 1st.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. No further questions, then roll call, please.
Member Demmett?
Yes.
Member Orr?
Yes.
Member Hassanadka?
Yes.
Member Hall?
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Exum?
Yes.
And President Pulaski?
Yes. 12.4, Carol is going to discuss our tentative budget for the next fiscal year.
So tentative is the key word here. This budget is basically required so that we can operate after July 1. So it's a formality. It does help us to kind of put something together so we kind of have an indication of what direction we're going. So the final budget won't be such a large surprise. But once we get all the information in and have better information in August, I can tell you the budget you approve in September will be much more accurate and reliable than what we're looking at today. John, I think first I'll go through the assumptions and then we'll talk about the budget summary. For new board members, these budget assumptions are what I put together just to kind of give the board an idea of what assumptions I'm making in preparing this budget for EAV and salary increases and things like that. It's a good history to go back on to kind of look at if things don't turn out quite the way we expected when we end up the year. We can go back and look at assumptions and say, well, it's because we assumed an EAV increase or a CPI of 1.4 and CPI actually came in higher than that. So, I mean, there's different assumptions we put in here because that's what we base this budget on. And when we have questions, it's good to have this history to go back on so we can remember what we relied on in order to prepare this budget. So as far as taxes are the over 50% of our revenues. So that is a big assumption as far as this budget goes. I'm happy to say that the tax distributions as of now are coming in as they are supposed to come in and as they did 2 years ago. So that's the first time that's happened because it's not been that way the last 2 years. So that is really good news. And the other thing is they're coming in and we're getting just as much as we did before. We thought because of COVID and the pandemic that we would have people that maybe weren't paying and our collection rate would go down, but we're not seeing that so far. So we're still at about 99% collection, which is great. And the CPI is assuming an increase of 1.4, which is a little bit, last year it was 2.3, so it's down a bit. So that will impact our revenues for this year. If you go down to number 3, the other good thing is last year they did not put in $350 million as they're required to in the budget, so we did not get an increase in our evidence-based funding. But this year they did appropriate the $350 million, so although we haven't received our allocations yet, so we don't know how much we're getting, we know we will get something But right now, I've not included that. I've not included any increase. So this tentative budget does not have any increase for the evidence-based funding. So hopefully we will have that information in August. Of course, we'll include that in the budget at that time. As we discussed just on the earlier part of the agenda, the U of I impact aid agreement is less. So we've put in the 50,000 rather than the 100,000, which is what it's been for the last 3 years. Most of the revenues that we have decreased this past year because of COVID, we anticipated corporate personal property replacement tax being down. We anticipated our sales tax revenue being down. All of those things ended up better than I anticipated last year. So that's good for this current year budget that we're just ending. So when my assumptions for this coming year budget is that all of those will be back to pre-pandemic levels. So we're hoping that all of those revenues will bounce back. Also, the number 9, the SROs, although we did get the reduction of about 67,000 this year in SROs because of the city, with the agreement with the city of Urbana. We will have some reduction, I think, the first couple of months, but more than likely the annual cost for that's going to be, it'll probably be a little bit less than 352. That's the normal amount. So the July and August amounts will reduce that. And this is the final year of that agreement. All the other items haven't really changed down to number 14. Actually, I probably should mention number 13. No expenses have been included in the budget right now for COVID-related costs. Most of those are being covered by ESSER. We actually applied for FEMA as well. We're just got information back this week that we've been denied on our first application there, but we will talk to them and see if we can get that reversed, and hoping that the future applications will be able to have some of that covered by FEMA. Number 14, due to ESSER again, we were able to move some of our district expenses into the ESSER grants. So that's listed out in number 14, just things that we know are related to COVID and that we've hired additional nurses and instructional materials and things. We are moving those costs into ESSER, so that will help the district budget this year. It is something we're keeping track of because we know that money is only available for 3 years. So these things will end up moving back to the district. So we are very well aware of that and we're keeping track of that. So we anticipate that in 2024. The salary increases are listed in number 15, and those are known at this time because we do have a 3-year agreement. So that's helpful because some years we're not in that position. So at least for salary increases, at least for this budget, I do a lump sum and budget it. But when we do the final budget, that's what makes that much more accurate. We go through and I'm budgeting based on every salary that's already increased in our system, and we budget based on those actual salary amounts in the proper accounts. So the final budget will be much more accurate for salaries. And with salaries being 80 to 90% of our expenses, that's key to making the budget more accurate. No major changes in benefits. As I stated on number 17, facility sales tax revenues are expected to go back to pre-pandemic levels. So that's good news there. We're still not seeing a huge increase. It's still around $3 million for facility sales tax. Hasn't gone up significantly over the years, but we hope to keep it at that $3 million level. Number 21, the next change would be the district's portion of the indoor aquatic center loss. The district and the Urbana Park District share in that 50-50. So that is our portion of that loss that we will pay in July. Most of the other budgets, as I mentioned in 23 and 24, we don't spend a lot of time at this point for the tentative budget making a lot of changes to those other grants and facility project budgets, because those are things that we're finalizing this summer as we see how much we've spent on them. A lot of them will carry over into the next fiscal year. So rather than spend time on that, we carry over those budgets, and those will be changed for the final budget. The last page of that assumptions is just a lot of historical things that I've put in there that kind of, it's a good place to go back to just to remember the things we went through in the past. It's all the budget cuts we went through, and that's a good historical perspective of the years we had those and the amount of cuts that we made. So, any questions on the assumptions before I go through the budget summary real quick?
Sorry, I have a few. Just for clarification, the health insurance benefits totally separate from the insurance you've got with the district, right? We're not changing that at all since we made the UEA agreement, right? There's no worries coming for our health insurance carriers, right? Okay, good.
No, it actually is, the amount that we pay towards the health insurance is based on the negotiated agreement, and
Right.
that stayed the same from
Yep.
last year.
That's good to know. Number 13, you said that we got denied for an application. What was that? Could you review that one again? It was
It was the FEMA. It was FEMA.
Oh, it was FEMA.
Yeah.
I did an application for PPE and a lot of our disinfecting supplies. And it was about 60,000 that we applied for. Just for the first application was March of 20 to June of 20. And we just got determination last week that they denied it. So there's an appeal process, and I'm going to call somebody and see what I need to do to appeal that, because
Is that typical? I mean, if we're
it's
for
been
COVID,
it's been very different from the school districts that I've heard that have applied. Some have been approved for, some of them haven't. So it's not been very consistent as far as who's been approved and not. Also, they are working under, I think, 3 different levels of changes during this COVID time, where they're approving things for certain periods and not for other periods. I've heard that PPE since January 1 will be covered. But of course, we bought a lot of PPE at the beginning of all of this, so that's not going to help us. Most of our expenses were in that first period, but we've still been buying PPE. So I'm hopeful that some of the application we're getting ready to do next is for the July through March period. And that's about $260,000. So we're going to apply for that and hope that maybe some of that will be approved, but
well, and then my last 2 questions, sorry to gum up the timing, but the potential penalties that you see in number 19, you're not hearing anything about potential penalties for TRS retirement and all that. I know we'd set money aside, and that was a big discussion point with our UEA agreement, but you're not hearing anything.
We will know in July, normally as people retire.
Yeah.
Those invoices start coming in July, so I will know more about that in the final budget.
Okay.
So it's usually something I will be able to budget exactly, unless somebody retires mid-year.
Yeah.
They usually retire June 30th. I will be notified within the first couple of months after that whether or not there will be a penalty.
Okay.
There's a potential we could have some because we haven't been capping people as much. So, but I just don't know what that is. So right now it's in there at 50,000, which is what we normally have been budgeting. But as soon as we know that we have an invoice in hand, we will budget that amount. And I'll include that in my assumptions in the fall.
Okay. And last but not least, I'm sorry, I told you I would ask, but this is about number 9 in the SRO budget. Simply because I remember when we were having discussions, was it earlier this year, earlier last year? COVID's kind of wiped my memory banks. But we had reduced costs because there was some attrition in the police department, correct? But the number is back up again. Is that because we've got the staffing numbers back up again, or are we still down? I mean, could you just explain that briefly? And
yeah, we saved, they reduced it about 22,000 a quarter. So it totaled about 67,000 last year that we saved. And it's because they weren't in the buildings. They were there, but they weren't doing as much as they normally were there for. And they didn't hire some people, I think is what it was. So they were able to give us these reductions. This year, we're expecting things to be back to normal. So they will be in our buildings every day, just like we had planned them to be. And the costs are going back up to what the agreement stipulates they're going to be. We're still waiting on, I think they are in the midst of negotiations with their police union. So this is a tentative number right now, but we will hopefully have that for the final budget as well.
Well, and I just wanted to bring it up because we've had this discussion in the past, but this is the last year of our agreement, and I thoroughly expect that this coming year we will have plans in place to review the policy, to review the agreement, so that we don't, if there's any budgeting talks that have to happen, that will be factored into it since it's the last year. And I know it's going to be a big bone of contention with people. So sorry to bring it up and poke the bear, but I feel like I'm obligated to do that. But thank you for bringing all this information to us. And
so real quick, if there's no other questions on the assumptions before I move on. The last one I want to go over is that pink budget summary. You were also provided the detailed budget that has all the different lines that add up to this, but the summary budget is like what I'd like to go over with, just to kind of highlight what we're looking at as far as revenues and expenditures by fund. So this sheet breaks out our total budget by fund. We're required to do it by fund like this because of how we levy taxes. So as you can see, our education fund is our largest fund. That's the one I usually concentrate on. And right now we're looking at like a deficit of about $325,000. As I've told the board before, I am never concerned when we are within 300,000 or 400,000 of being balanced. A 1% change in our extension, as far as if we get 54% before June 30th or 55%, we're cash basis, so it's all dependent on how those tax receipts are distributed to us. And if it's off by 1%, that could be $420,000 difference, swing either way. So when we're around $400,000 deficit, I personally don't worry too much about that, because a very small change can make that difference. So it could easily swing the other way and be a surplus. So I think that's good. But I do want to point out, we did take out some things and put them over in ESSER this year. So that's making things look a little better. So we need to, we'll probably have some more discussions this year about planning and how we're going to project that we look toward the future. So, but otherwise, I think you can see our other funds all look fairly good. I can say the construction fund, even though it looks like a $2 million deficit, that negative there in Fund 60. As you know, we have bonds that we've sold. So this is just showing your revenues and expenditures. It doesn't show the fund balance. I will include that on the final budget as well when we have year-end numbers. So I wouldn't worry about that $2 million, because we have bonds that we've sold. That cash is sitting in the bank. So we have that money available to cover those expenditures. So I think that kind of explains everything I wanted to go over. Again, spend more time on the final budget in August and September when we talk. The plan is just to get this budget approved, so we have a tentative budget in place. In September at the study session, I will talk in detail about the budget and present it. And then on the 15th business meeting, we'll ask for board approval of the budget. So
I have a question on the assumptions that I didn't ask when you were on there previously. Sorry, but when you say the Urbana Aquatic Center loss, is that just from loss of revenue from not having people doing classes and stuff during COVID, or what is the Aquatic Center loss?
It is not anything new. No, this is a loss we have every year since the pool's been in operation.
Oh.
It's kind of pools don't make money, from what I hear. We're lucky if we would break even, and we have never broken even in the time we've had.
Was this a bigger loss than the prior year?
Actually, it's smaller because we had less usage, we had less expenses, we had less people. I mean, they didn't have people.
You don't need the chlorine and all that. Yeah,
we were closed for a good portion of the year. So
it's the lifeguards and the staffing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the expense.
So unfortunately it's not new. Good question. I should have pointed that out. It's something that it's part of our budget every year, and it's what we do to contribute to the community being able to have access to that pool. I mean, it's a wonderful facility, but it does not make money. So
I think it's important to understand that the Park District provides all the staffing there, and that if we didn't have the Park District providing the staffing, for instance, we'd have to pay for lifeguards, or we'd have to pay for somebody to be lifeguard certified. So just having a pool, and I think saying that's the price of having it open to the public is probably oversimplified. That the pool would cost us money to operate no matter what, and so we should count on this 178 as the cost of our contribution to operations for the year, and that cost of operations might even be greater if it was just ours without Park District involvement at all. But Robbie, that figure has been as high as 350,000. I think one year they tried to have it over 400, and we were able to work it so it was less than 400. So this is actually a pretty modest. This is more along the lines of what was projected when the pool first opened. um, adjusted for inflation, as opposed to what it has been in some years, which is much higher. So, so Carol, you're going to take a look at projected end of the year balances and so forth when you come back, because that's also important to understand, is that the board has the ability to move revenues around, and we have starved some funds in order to keep more money in education. But over the last couple of years, we've made a great deal of progress in bringing some of those starved funds that were driven into negative figures. We've brought them back closer, if not totally balanced them. It would seem to me that, for instance, this year, transportation would be a fund that we would make some significant progress in moving a negative fund balance into a positive fund balance.
That's true, but the transportation fund, for instance, is based on the revenues are based on what you spent the previous year. So our revenues are going to be really high this year because it's based on last year's expenses that we claimed, but our expenses are going to be low. So you're going to have a big surplus this year in transportation, but next year revenues are going to go way down because I'm not going to be claiming as much this year. So it's going to over 2 years, it's going to balance out, but you're going to show a big surplus this next year, and then you're going to show a deficit. So those will balance out over the time. So, but you're right. I think. Go ahead.
No, I didn't realize you were not done. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think what you'll find out too when I come back in September to present and have end of year numbers. I'm expecting this past year to have done very well, better than expected, because we were so conservative in budgeting and the revenues didn't go down as much as I expected. So I think things will be better. The fund balances will bounce back some, but there's still the future. We've still got a deficit that is underlying here that we've moved some of these things over to ESSER to help that out this year, but that's going to, once that ESSER money is gone, that deficit's still going to be there. So we just need to know that that's actually still part of our structural expenses and revenues. They're not balanced on an ongoing basis. And I'll get into more of that this year, but
I thought we were closer to getting rid of that structural deficit from an overall viewpoint, all funds together. I thought it was.
Some of the other funds are doing better, but we've, as you said, we've kind of taken money from education fund. The last couple of years, we've put more money into O&M from our tax levy because we wanted to do that because that was the only way we were going to get the O&M fund out of deficit. So again, with our tax levy, we only get a certain amount of money, and it's a matter of what pot of our funds you want to put that in. And if you put more into O&M, there's less money to go in ed fund.
And which brings up one of the TIF districts looks like it's going to expire next year. And so will that figure into the revenue for this budget year that you're putting together, or will it be the following? There's one of them. There's one of them that is done in 22.
Yeah, that'll be the following year.
Following year. Okay.
Yep. It comes off the tax rolls in December of 22, so it won't affect this December levy.
I apologize for obvious reasons. I didn't get a chance to do my homework over the weekend like I usually do. And I know the budget assumptions weren't released until basically around 4 o'clock this afternoon or 3 o'clock this afternoon. So,
sorry, I thought they were in there Friday.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else? All right, is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Is there a second for approving the tentative budget?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Demmett?
Yes.
Member Orr?
Yes.
Member Hassanadka? Member Hall?
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Exum,
Yes.
President Pulaski,
Yes. Tentative budget passes. Let's see. 12.5, the tentative Urbana adult education budget for the next fiscal year. This was in our packets. It's in line with what it's been in the past.
I just had a quick question. Somebody can answer. I was curious for salaries. How many employees does adult ed employ?
So we pay for Ms. Shear's salary of the district. That was something that 3 years ago was switched over. And for the director of their finance person, Marcellus's salary, those have been district expenses. So right now, there were several cuts made in the last 2 years. They've decreased their FTE for their teaching staff significantly. So I guess I can't speak to exactly how many teachers are left. Brenda, I know it's very, very minimal. I know there's Peggy Buck. Donna, who runs the assessment center, is still there. There's a receptionist, and Carol Sutherland, who is the clerical kind of office manager person. So not very many staff members are left because they have had some decreases in some of their budget expenses for salaries.
Okay, I was just surprised when I saw that number for salaries, 718,887. Yeah, it seems like a lot to me if they don't have that many staff. So that's what stood out to me, why I was asking.
That is a huge number. You're right. We pay for Shauna and Marcellus, so they have very few teachers left. Actual full-time FTE
expenses too. I mean, they don't. We pay for the building. We pay for the maintenance on the building. We do all the payroll and take care of the finance side a lot. So provide Skyward. So salaries are the biggest piece of what they do. They probably have a little bit in there for supplies, but
yeah, and I know.
And I guess those were the full-time people. The CNA teacher, Felicia Freeman, she's a full-time person. And all the other people are just part-time. They have very few full-time staff members who are there every day, 5 days a week. So
I thought Ms. Freeman's was paid for from a grant. Maybe I was wrong thinking that, but I thought that hers was because we had originally, not too long ago, we had actually riffed her. And it was pending a grant to come.
The CNA grant, okay.
Yeah. So I would like further
I'll find out
information if you could let me know. That would be great because
sure.
Dr. Ever Tatum, there are 22 people on their roster.
Thank you, Todd, for pulling that up.
Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion on the floor?
I move to approve the budget for adult education.
It looks. John Dimon has indicated that he's supplying a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Roll call, please.
All right, Member Dimmitt.
Sorry, I couldn't get to my mute button fast enough back there. Yes, I did second it. Yes.
Member Orr.
Yes.
Member Hassanadka. Member Hall.
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Exum.
Yes.
President Pulaski.
Yes. And the budget passes. 12.6 is our upcoming board meeting schedule for the next academic year. So in front of us is a listing of the proposed dates, which are right along the first and third Tuesdays of August through June. We typically look at these and target a few of them to move because they come at inconvenient times. So if the first meeting also sometimes gets bumped a week because people have vacation. So if there are any, let's just start with that. If there is strong desire to move any of the August meetings because of, already known travel dates for board members. I'd like to hear that at this point in time. Yes, go ahead, John.
I just want to also comment that many times the administration finds meeting that early in August. You basically have to be here in July in order to prepare for a meeting that early in August, that there's more than just board member travel dates that come into play, plus the types of things that need to be done during the month of August in order to get school open is sometimes better done with a meeting in the middle of August and one towards the end of August. Just throwing it out there.
Well, I know this year we kept the August schedule the same, and I thought it worked out fine. We're all going to be here in July, so I don't know that we're recommending a change. So that would be up to the board.
Well, these dates work for me, but I'd like to hear from my fellow board members.
They work for me.
All right, let's keep these August dates as printed. And then December 21st comes during the winter break, or is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I would recommend moving that to the 14th.
I would, yes, agree with that recommendation.
Okay. And March 15th comes during spring break. And I can't remember if moving it before or before spring break is typically better for our staff because they don't have to work during spring break to prepare for the board meeting coming immediately after spring break.
And this year we moved it before spring break also, so we can make sure we reach the 45-day RIF deadline. So if we go too far into March,
right,
that really pushes us to make sure. So if we can move that to have the 1st and the 8th, that's what we did this year. If the board is amenable to that.
Right.
So we'll move March 15th to March 8th. Okay.
That sounds great. Does anybody wish to make any other further changes to this proposed list of meeting dates? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the slate of meeting dates as amended.
Second.
I'd say the issue that was brought up about spring break, wouldn't you have the same issue with January 4th with all the planning being done during the holiday break? So you just have like a day or two
We would notice
before?
the meeting in advance, so I think we're okay
No.
with January 4th,
Okay.
unless the board wishes to move it.
It's fine by me either way. I'm just saying it's the same issue. So I thought maybe
That's probably
maybe
the first day back.
Yeah, is that the
that'll
first
be
week
the
back or?
second day back. We're actually coming back on the 3rd.
On the
All right.
3rd. It's a good point though, Robbie.
Yeah.
But if the administration is that's not going to be an undue burden for you guys, I'm okay with leaving it.
All right. Okay. Is there a motion on the floor?
I'll move to accept the calendar for dates
As amended.
as it has been. Sorry, I move to amend and approve this coming year's board meeting dates as suggested.
With the dates we discussed.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, roll call, please.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Orr,
Yes.
Member Hassanaka,
Yes.
Member Hall,
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Exum,
Yes.
President Pulaski.
Yes. There is no specific call for future special or executive meetings, but there will be special and executive meetings. We're going to need one for the lease agreement, and we're also going to need an exec session for personnel evaluation. Time for a superintendent's report.
Okay. All right, John, it's very short, and I think John already has it up. Basically just highlighting a couple of our students. That very first picture is, and John might want to say something about this. I know he has a little background. Wait for John to get it up. Our tennis So if you want to scroll, oh, I've got the clicker. Sorry. There we go. So I just wanted to recognize, I don't know if everyone saw the great article about the Salava family and recognizing their father. The brothers and sister are sitting under the tree, and the tree that was planted in Blair Park in honor of their father, and the memorial plaque with the UHS high school tennis team. I don't know, John, do you want to say anything about that? I know you had a connection there.
Which John are you talking to?
John Dimmitt. You, John.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we all saw that.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And then I definitely wanted to recognize our Lady Tigers there, regional champs for softball since, gosh, I can't remember. Yes, I was going to say 1980. I can't remember, but yes, 30
Just
years.
before I got on the board, so you know how long ago it was.
Yes. So they were super excited. They did, not win out in their sectional, but we are just so proud of them and just super excited for their efforts. They're a wonderful group of girls, and they represent Urbana well. And so just congratulations.
Who
to
are they
them, regional
coached by?
champs. Billy Harmon is the coach. He's
great.
been the coach for I don't know how many years, but a very long time. So, yes. Okay, and that is it for me. Oh, I have FOIA, sorry. So all the FOIAs have been completed and fulfilled. We had a FOIA from the News Gazette, Ben Zichterman. Any emails sent from Don Owen or Ron Langacker to Dr. Abby Tatum or Tyler Bowman or Frank Garrett or the school board from February 1 to May 7, 2021, that include the words settlement, payment, lawsuit, or mediation.
And those have all been completed.
Those have all been completed and fulfilled.
Great. Yes. Time for board reports.
I just have a quick one. The IASB is offering many online workshops this summer. I've attended a few of them. They're very, very good. The same with Robin Schwartz. And it's great to take advantage of these. Many of the ones from the IASB are actually free. You still have to go online and register, but they're very, very informative. So if you get a chance, sign up for one. I know I've learned a lot. Thank you.
I'll quickly update the board on the Racial Equity Task Force meeting. We had a meeting on Tuesday. I was actually able to participate via Zoom on my phone as I drove back from Alabama. But it was, in prior meetings, we had broken into smaller groups to kind of wordsmith the board policy with regards to racial equity. But this time it all kind of came together, and it was tough, but it was tough in a good way. We shared a lot of ideas. We didn't make a large quantity of progress, but I think the quality of the work we did was excellent and needed. And we're scheduling further sessions to continue the work to complete that out. But I was really proud of how we conducted all the discussions involved in that, in crafting that. And I think we're going to come up with something that's going to be really special.
I will say something as well. So a couple, earlier we were talking about, increasing equity and, for AP classes in high school, and how some of that planning starts in 8th grade or with AVID, and now even down to 5th grade. So a week and a half ago, I was on this Zoom call that Laura Orr and Tori Exum were also on, where they were taking it to a even earlier level, and that's the early childhood level. So that was part of, I think it was called the Champaign County Planning Group, Illinois Action for Children, where they're trying to figure out, they're planning on applying for grants to apply money to increase enrollment in early childhood education, to create a better foundation at the beginning, so that way kids that are starting kindergarten are at where the standard should be of what they should know when they're entering kindergarten. So there's this thing they have called it's called a slot gap. So there's this early child care and education publicly funded program, slot gap. So It's the number of students, or not students, but potential students that could be in these programs that aren't in these programs. And they're trying to figure out how to get better access to them, whether that's easier applications, just getting better information through assessments, through like WIC programs or pediatricians, et cetera. So it sounds like a year-long process that we're going to be part of. But that's was the first meeting. And so it's going to be kind of monthly going on for the next year.
Thank you. Any more board reports? Hearing none, is there a move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Orr,
Yes.
Member Hassan Adkat,
Yes.
Member Hall,
Yes.
Member Carter votes yes. Vice President Exum,
Yes.
President Pulaski.
Yes, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.